Imagine walking onto a stage knowing that your very existence threatens everything: your career, your safety, your family's acceptance. Picture the suffocating weight of choosing between artistic authenticity and survival, between living your truth and keeping your livelihood. This was the impossible choice faced by countless Black LGBTQ+ musicians who dared to create in industries built on exclusion. These weren't just artists, they were revolutionaries disguised as entertainers, freedom fighters wielding instruments instead of weapons. From the church pews to the concert halls, from underground clubs to mainstream stages, they carved out spaces for themselves in a world determined to erase them. Some found acceptance, others faced brutal rejection, but all paid a price for refusing to hide who they were. Their stories reveal the intersection of racism and homophobia, where being Black and gay meant facing double the hatred, double the barriers, and double the courage required just to exist, let alone create groundbreaking music that would change the world forever. Little Richard, the explosive pioneer, who couldn't stop running. He was a human firework who set the music world ablaze, but the flames consumed him from within. Little Richard didn't just enter the music scene, he exploded into it like a glittering bomb that shattered the conservative 1950s into a million colorful pieces. His wild piano playing, ear-piercing screams, and flamboyant style, the makeup, the towering hair, the sequined outfits, were more than performance art. They were acts of rebellion in a world that demanded Black men remain invisible and submissive. But America wasn't ready for a Black man who painted his face like a woman, screamed like a banshee, and moved like sexual freedom personified. Record executives tried desperately to tone him down, terrified of his explosive energy and the questions it raised. Parents worried about his influence on their children, while audiences couldn't decide if they were watching genius or madness. The internal war between his sexual identity and deep religious convictions created a tortuous cycle. He'd speak openly about loving men, then retreat into religious shame, abandoning music for the church, only to come roaring back to the stage again. This wasn't just personal turmoil, it became a public spectacle, with each departure and return sparking fresh controversy. Little Richard's influence on rock legends like Prince and David Bowie is undeniable, but the path he carved was drenched in judgment, confusion, and the constant battle between two worlds that refused to let him exist peacefully in either. Sylvester, the disco queen who burned around him. Ma Rainey, the mother of blues who birthed a revolution. She didn't just sing the blues, she lived them openly when living openly could kill you. Gertrude Ma. Rainey commanded stages across the Jim Crow South with the authority of a woman who had seen hell and decided to make it sing. Known as the Mother of the Blues, she brought the raw, unfiltered sound of Black Southern life to the world in the 1920s, but her greatest rebellion wasn't musical, it was personal. Her song, Prove It On Me Blues, was a brazen declaration of same-sex desire that should have ended her career instantly. The promotional material showed her in masculine clothing, surrounded by women, while a policeman watched suspiciously. In 1928, this wasn't artistic expression, it was career suicide with a melody. Stories circulated about her wild private parties and relationships with women, creating scandal waves that should have drowned her career. She even faced legal trouble related to her lifestyle, highlighting the very real dangers she navigated daily. But Rainey owned her own touring company, traveled in her own custom railroad car, and surrounded herself with musicians who respected her authority. Her independence was radical for any woman in the 1920s, but for a Black lesbian openly living her truth in the conservative South, it was revolutionary. Every performance was an act of defiance, every song a declaration that she would live on her own terms, regardless of the consequences. Ma Rainey laid the groundwork for every blues artist who followed, proving that authentic expression could triumph over societal expectations, even when that triumph came at enormous personal cost. Bessie Smith, the empress who ruled with an iron fist and a broken heart. She was crowned the Empress of Blues, but her kingdom was built on secrets that could have destroyed her throne. Bessie Smith's voice wasn't just powerful, it was a natural disaster that reshaped the musical landscape of the 1920s. Her massive success made her one of the highest-paid black performers of her era, but her personal life was as turbulent as her professional life was triumphant. Known for her fiery temper and legendary drinking, Smith lived as intensely offstage as she performed on it. Whispers followed her everywhere about relationships with both men and women, creating a constant undercurrent of scandal beneath her imperial success. Her fierce personality led to physical confrontations when she felt disrespected. She once reportedly protected Ma Rainey from trouble, showing the solidarity that existed among blues women living outside society's narrow rules. The contradiction was exhausting. She was wealthy enough to travel in her own train car, successful enough to command any venue, yet constantly vulnerable to exposure and ruin. Her refusal to conform to expectations about female behavior, combined with rumors about her sexuality, made her a lightning rod for both admiration and controversy. The changing times and Great Depression brought career challenges that had nothing to do with her talent and everything to do with society's evolving tolerance for unconventional women. When she died tragically in a car accident in 1937, it silenced a voice that had dared to sing with raw, unapologetic honesty about life, love, and desire in ways that polite society found both irresistible and threatening. Billy Strayhorn, the hidden genius behind the Duke. He wrote the soundtrack to American Elegance while remaining invisible in plain sight. Behind Duke Ellington's gleaming success stood Billy Strayhorn, a quiet storm of musical genius whose sexuality made him simultaneously invaluable and invisible. For decades, he composed and arranged masterpieces like Take the A Train and Lush Life, yet often remained in Ellington's shadow, partly by choice, partly by necessity, in an era that spat venom at difference. As an openly gay black man in the 1940s jazz world, Strayhorn faced astronomical risks. Ellington offered protection within the band's cocoon, creating a small, safe space in a hostile industry. But this meant Strayhorn often missed out on the public recognition and awards that went primarily to Ellington. The arrangement was both salvation and sacrifice. Professional survival at the cost of individual recognition. Did Strayhorn resent staying hidden? His sophisticated compositions like Lush Life, written as a teenager, suggest a complex emotional landscape shaped by having to navigate a precarious existence. Some historians believe his quiet nature, combined with societal prejudice, kept him from seeking the solo spotlight his talent deserved. He channeled his energy into civil rights activism, fighting for others' freedom while carefully managing his own vulnerable position. His musical genius shaped American jazz permanently, but his story remains one of quiet defiance against a society that refused to fully see or acknowledge him. The tragedy isn't just personal, it's cultural. How much more might Strayhorn have achieved without those heavy shadows? His legacy raises uncomfortable questions about how many other brilliant artists were forced to choose between visibility and survival. Frankie Knuckles, the godfather of safe spaces. He didn't just create house music, he built sanctuaries for people society had abandoned. Frankie Knuckles worked magic in the basement of Chicago's Warehouse Club, but he wasn't just mixing records. He was mixing hope with desperation, creating the soundtrack for a community under siege. As the godfather of house music, he transformed disco and soul into something entirely new, but his greatest achievement was creating a safe space for black and gay people to exist freely, even if only for a few hours each weekend. The Warehouse offered refuge, but outside its walls, the communities it served faced brutal police harassment, social rejection, and the growing AIDS crisis. Knuckles, an openly gay black man, understood he wasn't just creating music, he was creating survival mechanisms for people society wanted to disappear. His revolutionary mixing techniques, sometimes using actual razor blades and tape for edits, were born from necessity and innovation, but they also attracted unwanted attention from authorities suspicious of the late-night gatherings and alternative crowd. Every night at the warehouse was a risk, not just musically, but legally and socially. As house music spread globally and earned mainstream recognition, including Grammy Awards, the roots remained firmly planted in a specific community's need for refuge from hostility. Knuckles' success came with the bittersweet knowledge that his creation had outgrown its original purpose of providing safety for the marginalized. His death in 2014 left a void, but the house he built still stands as a testament to music created against impossible odds, proof that sometimes the most revolutionary art comes from the most desperate need for somewhere to belong. Johnny Mathis, the romantic voice. Hiding a romantic secret. He sang love songs to millions while keeping his own love story locked away for decades. Johnny Mathis's voice was velvet, wrapped around silk, making hits like Chances Are. The soundtrack to countless romances in the late 1950s. His smooth delivery and romantic image made him a superstar, but the man behind the microphone was performing a different kind of song, one of careful concealment and strategic silence about his personal life. For decades, Mathis maintained an intensely private existence, understanding that revealing his homosexuality could shatter the romantic fantasy his career was built upon. In an era where male singers were expected to embody heterosexual desire, being openly gay was professional suicide disguised as personal choice. An offhanded comment in a 1982 magazine interview briefly mentioned his orientation, causing immediate controversy that he quickly distanced himself from. The incident revealed the tightrope he walked daily. One slip could send him tumbling from the heights of success into career oblivion. The pressure must have been suffocating. Year after year of careful navigation, strategic answers, and emotional compartmentalization. While other artists dealt with loud, dramatic controversies, Mathis faced the quiet torture of living a public lie while singing honestly about emotions he couldn't openly experience. His long, steady career was remarkable, but it also represented the silent struggles faced by even the most beloved stars. When he finally acknowledged his sexuality much later in life, it confirmed what many had long suspected, that behind the smooth romantic image was a man who had sacrificed personal authenticity for professional survival. Luther Vandross, the Velvet Voice. Trapped in silence. He defined R&B romance while his own romantic life remained a mystery that may have killed him. Luther Vandross possessed one of the most recognizable voices in music history, crafting timeless love songs that made him the king of romantic R&B. Hits like Never Too Much and Here and Now defined the sound of intimate connection, yet the man who sang so eloquently about love remained mysteriously silent about his own romantic experiences. His personal life was locked away behind walls of intense privacy that became increasingly noticeable as rumors about his sexuality swirled for years. Friends later suggested he was a gay man who felt trapped, unable to come out due to family pressure and the crushing expectations of being a black male R&B superstar whose career was built on selling heterosexual romance to female fans. His dedication to his mother and deep fear of disappointing her were often cited as reasons for his decades of silence. But the weight of that silence may have been physically crushing. The stress of living a double life, of channeling authentic emotion into songs while denying authentic relationships, created an unbearable psychological burden. A major stroke in 2003 changed everything, leading to his death 2 years later. While his music celebrated love in all its forms, his own story hints at a profound loneliness, the painful conflict between private truth and public image that defined his generation of closeted performers. The controversy wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was deep and perhaps profoundly destructive. His immense talent shone brightly, But the man behind that velvet voice remained partly hidden, trapped by expectations that may have cost him not just happiness, but ultimately his life. Michelle NdegéOcello, the bassist who refused all boxes. She exploded onto the scene, refusing every label except the one that mattered, honest. Michelle NdegéOcello arrived like a musical earthquake, blending funk, soul, jazz, and rock into something fierce and unapologetically personal. From her debut, she was different, openly identifying as bisexual when most artists wouldn't even whisper such words, crafting music that explored politics, identity, and love with fearless honesty that left listeners exhilarated and terrified. Her track Leviticus confronted religious prejudice head-on, using stark, uncompromising language that shocked radio programmers and many listeners. The song wasn't just music, it was warfare against the biblical passages used to justify hatred against LGBTQ+ people. Was the industry ready for such raw truth-telling? The answer was complicated. Her talent was undeniable, but her refusal to conform made executives nervous. Her complex bass lines and poetic lyrics demanded attention, but her inability to fit into neat marketing categories created constant friction in an industry that preferred simple solutions to complex artists. She often spoke about feeling like an outsider in various music scenes, not black enough for some, not queer enough for others, too political for mainstream success. Grammy nominations proved her artistic merit, but her journey highlighted the exhausting battle faced by artists who dare to be uncompromisingly themselves. Every interview, every performance, every song became a statement about the right to exist authentically in spaces that preferred profitable simplicity. NdegéOcello's career became a masterclass in artistic integrity over commercial success, paving the way for future artists who would refuse to hide their complexity for the comfort of audiences unprepared for full humanity. Frank Ocean, the quiet storm, who changed everything. He dropped a letter that shattered hip-hop's glass closet, then disappeared into the mystery he created. Frank Ocean arrived like a whisper that became a roar, changing R&B with nostalgic soundscapes that felt like recovered memories. But his most revolutionary act wasn't musical. It was a simple letter posted online just before his major album release, speaking honestly about loving another young man. In the hyper-masculine worlds of hip-hop and R&B, this wasn't just personal revelation, it was a cultural earthquake. The timing was either genius or career suicide. Dropping such a bombshell right before Channel Orange created immediate controversy. Was this authentic vulnerability or calculated publicity? Many praised his bravery, but industry whispers suggested some executives and artists offered only quiet support, afraid to be too closely associated with the fallout. His music, already complex with feelings about love and identity, suddenly carried the weight of representation. Every song became analyzed for clues about his relationships, every public appearance scrutinized for signs of how the revelation had affected him. Albums like Blonde cemented his artistic status, but they also revealed an artist increasingly withdrawn from public life. His subsequent reclusiveness raises questions. Is this privacy a natural artistic choice or a shield built after facing the potential backlash of his honesty? Ocean's courage opened doors for other artists, but it also highlighted the cruel reality that such honest admissions of love could still be considered risky career moves. His influence is undeniable, but he remains an enigma, a man who changed everything with one letter, then spent years navigating fame on his own carefully guarded terms, proving that breakthrough moments often come with unexpected costs. Janelle Monáe, the android who became human. She built entire worlds to hide in, then tore them down to reveal herself. Janelle Monáe constructed elaborate science fiction universes around her identity, creating concept albums like The Archandroid that explored freedom and identity through the safety of futuristic metaphor. For years, she skillfully deflected personal questions behind her black and white suits and android personas, cultivating an image of controlled, almost robotic perfection that fascinated audiences while protecting her privacy. Then came the revelation. She identified as pansexual, and suddenly the careful construction came tumbling down. Her album, Dirty Computer, became a vibrant celebration of blackness, womanhood, and queer identity that felt like watching someone emerge from a beautifully crafted cocoon into blazing authenticity. Songs like Make Me Feel weren't just catchy, they were anthems of sexual and emotional fluidity that challenged everything about her previous persona. The transformation was stunning, but it also raised questions. Did embracing explicit queer themes alienate some early fans who preferred the coded, abstract approach of her earlier work? Monáe's evolution from mysterious android to proud queer woman of color represents a masterclass in artistic courage, but it also required immense strength to abandon a successful formula for risky authenticity. Her current activism, linking her art directly to fights for justice, makes her a powerful force that constantly challenges audiences to grow alongside her. Every performance now carries the weight of representation. Every song becomes a statement about the right to exist fully in a world still grappling with the identities she proudly champions. Her journey from hiding behind sci-fi concepts to confronting reality head-on reflects both personal courage and the evolution of an industry slowly learning to embrace complexity. Lil Nas X, the country rap revolutionary who broke every rule. He conquered the charts, then set them on fire with a truth that made America lose its mind. Old Town Road was just the beginning of Lil Nas X's assault on musical boundaries, but his decision to come out as gay during Pride Month while straddling country and hip-hop, two of music's most notoriously homophobic genres, was pure cultural warfare. The reaction was immediate and explosive. While many celebrated his courage, a tsunami of hateful comments crashed down from conservative commentators and industry figures who couldn't stomach a gay black cowboy. Did he retreat? Absolutely not. Instead, he leaned into the controversy with the skill of a master provocateur, using fashion, humor, and stunningly bold music videos like Montero, Call Me By Your Name, to celebrate his identity while confronting prejudice head-on. Every move seemed calculated to maximum provocation, leading critics to accuse him of chasing controversy for attention rather than artistic expression. The accusations missed the point entirely. In a world where being authentic as a young, black gay artist was still dangerous, controversy became a survival strategy. His ability to transform backlash into viral moments, turning homophobic attacks into trending topics, represented a new model for how marginalized artists could seize control of their narratives. His rise challenged fundamental assumptions about who could succeed in mainstream American music. Each video, each red carpet appearance, each social media post became a statement about refusing to be diminished by hatred. Critics called it attention-seeking. Supporters recognized it as a revolution disguised as entertainment. Lil Nas X didn't just break barriers. He demolished them with such style and humor that his enemies could only watch in frustration as their attacks became his ammunition for even greater success. Syd, the cool confidence of quiet revolution. Her laid-back demeanor masked the radical act of making lesbian love sound like the most natural thing in the world. Syd's journey from anchoring the hip-hop collective Odd Future to leading the soulful band The Internet to crafting intimate solo R&B represents a masterclass in quiet confidence. Her smooth, understated approach to singing openly about relationships with women brought a lesbian perspective to R&B with such natural ease that it almost masked how groundbreaking her presence was. But did this quiet confidence shield her from industry challenges, or simply make them less visible? Bringing authentic lesbian experiences to a genre often focused on traditional heterosexual romance narratives was revolutionary. yet some critics questioned whether her laid-back style lacked the dramatic intensity often expected from R&B love songs. Her decision to build her own studio early in her career suggests an understanding that creative control might be necessary to maintain artistic integrity outside traditional industry structures. This independence allowed her to explore relationships and sexuality without external pressure to conform to market expectations or radio-friendly formulas. While less overtly controversial than some of her peers, Syd's steady presence as an openly gay woman carving her own lane represents a quieter form of defiance. Her focus on artistic integrity over commercial appeal raises questions about true acceptance versus mere tolerance in the music industry. Does the industry fully embrace her perspective, or is she still pushing against invisible barriers of expectation for female vocalists? Her career suggests that sometimes the most powerful revolutions happen not with explosive drama, but with the simple, radical act of existing authentically and refusing to apologize for taking up space in rooms that weren't designed for people like her. Kevin Abstract, the heart on his sleeve, in hip-hop's hardest genre. He turned vulnerability into a weapon in music's most masculine battleground. As leader of the boundary-pushing boy band Brockhampton, Kevin Abstract did something that should have been impossible. He rapped and sang about being a young gay man with shocking honesty in hip-hop, a genre historically allergic to vulnerability and openly hostile to homosexuality. Albums like the Saturation Trilogy offered perspectives rarely heard in mainstream rap, creating space for conversations that had been violently suppressed for decades. But this openness came with enormous risks. His willingness to share specific, vulnerable details about relationships, loneliness, and sexual identity resonated powerfully with fans who had never heard their experiences reflected in hip-hop. But it also made him a target for homophobic attacks that ranged from online harassment to real-world threats. The pressure was multifaceted. He wasn't just representing himself, but carrying the weight of representation for LGBTQ+ youth who saw him as proof that they could exist in spaces that had previously felt impossibly hostile. Every verse became a political statement, every interview a chance for both inspiration and potential backlash. His raw honesty about mental health struggles, family rejection, and the complexity of growing up gay and black created music that was deeply relatable, but born from courage that constantly walked a controversial line. The success of Brockhampton proved there was hunger for authentic voices in hip-hop, but it also highlighted the intense scrutiny faced by artists who dared to break from genre norms. Abstract's willingness to be emotionally exposed in hip-hop's hardest corners opened doors for others, but it also demonstrated the enormous personal cost of being first. The exhausting burden of representation that comes with pioneering visibility in hostile territories. Tyler, the Creator, the evolution of a provocateur. He went from rap's most shocking villain to its most vulnerable truth-teller, and nobody knew what to make of the transformation. Tyler emerged from the Odd Future collective like a hurricane of controversy, crafting lyrics so shocking and violent that several countries banned him from entering their borders. Early work sparked legitimate outrage about whether his words promoted dangerous ideologies or were simply the provocative art of a young iconoclast pushing every possible boundary. Then came the evolution. Albums like Flower Boy and the Grammy-winning Eager revealed a completely different artist, one capable of stunning vulnerability, hinting at romantic relationships with men, and exploring complex emotional territories that seemed impossible from the same person who had once rapped about violence and chaos. The transformation raised profound questions. Was this genuine artistic growth, or another layer of his elaborately constructed provocative persona? His continued elusiveness about directly addressing his sexuality, sometimes playfully contradicting himself in interviews, maintained the mystery that had always surrounded his work. Igor detailed a love triangle involving another man with startling emotional honesty, But Tyler's refusal to provide clear answers about his identity kept audiences guessing. Was he genuinely embracing vulnerability or manipulating expectations while maintaining control of his narrative? This ambiguity itself became controversial. Some critics praised his artistic evolution and brave vulnerability. Others questioned whether his hints and suggestions were authentic or calculated moves designed to generate discussion and maintain relevance. The debate surrounding Tyler's identity and intentions reflects larger questions about authenticity, growth, and the right of artists to control their own narratives, even when those narratives involve subjects that could provide representation for underserved communities hungry for visibility in hip-hop spaces. Big Freedia, the queen who made bounce beautiful. She turned New Orleans' underground sound into mainstream magic, but the spotlight came with shadows. Big Freedia's infectious energy brought New Orleans' high-octane bounce music to the world, using she/her pronouns while commanding stages with the authority of hip-hop royalty. As a gender non-conforming gay artist, her very presence challenged every assumption about who could succeed in hip-hop, turning her performances into celebrations of identity that had been marginalized for decades. Her reality show, Big Freedia, Queen of Bounce, introduced mainstream audiences to bounce culture. But did it also expose her community to exploitation and misunderstanding? The show celebrated her life and community while sometimes sensationalizing aspects for television drama, creating complicated questions about representation versus entertainment. Bounce music's deep roots in New Orleans' LGBTQ pulse scene meant that bringing it mainstream inevitably attracted scrutiny from audiences unfamiliar with its cultural context. Collaborations with megastars like Beyoncé proved Bounce's commercial viability, but they also raised questions about cultural appropriation and whether mainstream success might dilute the music's authentic community origins. Legal troubles related to housing assistance highlighted the offstage challenges she faced, proving that professional success couldn't shield her from systemic discrimination and bureaucratic harassment that disproportionately affected people from her community. Freedia's journey represents the complex negotiations required when underground cultures meet mainstream success. Her achievement in bringing bounce music to global audiences was groundbreaking, but it also demonstrated how visibility can be both liberation and vulnerability, offering new opportunities while exposing artists and their communities to forms of judgment and exploitation they had previously avoided in their protective underground spaces. Saucy Santana, the material girl in a hostile world. He turned rap's rejection into his greatest asset, making enemies into unwitting promoters. Saucy Santana's transformation from makeup artist to viral sensation to legitimate rap star represents one of the most audacious success stories in recent hip-hop history. His tracks, like Material Girl, celebrate femininity, success, and unapologetic flair in a genre that has historically punished such expressions, making every song an act of defiance against rigid masculine expectations. As an openly gay rapper embracing high fashion and makeup, he directly confronted hip-hop's most sacred taboos about masculinity and sexuality. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Constant online harassment, questions about his legitimacy in the genre, and attacks fueled by both misogyny and homophobia that would have destroyed less resilient artists. Old, insensitive tweets from his past surfaced during his rise, forcing him to address previous mistakes while navigating current criticism, a double burden of accountability that his straight counterparts rarely faced. The scrutiny was relentless, but Santana transformed it into fuel for his brand. His genius lay in incorporating defiance into his artistic identity, turning insults into catchphrases and hate into marketing materials. When critics questioned whether his flamboyant style was too much for mainstream rap, he responded by becoming even more theatrical, even more unapologetically himself. Santana's rise proved that authentic self-expression could triumph over industry gatekeeping. but it also highlighted the ongoing battles for acceptance within hip-hop culture. He wasn't just making hits, he was kicking down doors while dodging the debris thrown by those who wanted to keep them locked. His success became a statement about resilience, turning rap's hostility toward difference into his greatest competitive advantage. These 20 artists represent more than individual success stories. They are the architects of a cultural revolution that transformed American music from the inside out. Their journeys reveal the complex mathematics of identity in entertainment. Being Black and LGBTQ+ meant facing exponential discrimination, where racism and homophobia compounded to create barriers that seemed insurmountable. From Little Richard's explosive early defiance to Lil Nas X's viral provocations, each generation found new ways to carve out space for authentic expression in hostile territories. Some, like Rainey and Bessie Smith, lived their truths openly when doing so could have meant death. Others, like Vandross and Mathis, chose silence as survival strategy, paying the price in psychological isolation. The evolution is remarkable. Where once artists like Billy Strayhorn had to remain invisible despite their genius, today's performers like Janelle Monáe and Frank Ocean can build entire careers around authentic self-expression. Yet the struggles continue. Acceptance remains conditional, success still requires superhuman resilience, and the burden of representation weighs heavily on those brave enough to live visibly. Their collective legacy proves that art created from authentic lived experience possesses power that transcends entertainment. These musicians didn't just create songs, they created possibilities, showing future generations that survival and success were achievable even in the face of seemingly impossible odds. The revolution they started continues in every young LGBTQ+ artist who no longer has to choose between authenticity and ambition, proving that sometimes the most radical act is simply refusing to disappear.